I think you can't ignore the fact that the sums of money going into this industry are truly gargantuan. Circularity of these deals is interesting. Things can flip quite quickly. 1 gigawatt of a data center for AI basically costs $50 billion in capex. On an annual running basis, it costs between like another 8 to 9, maybe even $11 billion to run. Companies are trying to do deals with anybody who has any capacity. In the short term, what many GPU data centers are getting powered on is just gas turbines. It's wild that we've come to the point where we just want like an AI that works on our computer, but like to get that, you need to have so many more powerful systems collaborate with you. That was the first time you had a system that could show its reasoning. Since then to now, the progress is pretty astounding.
Hi, I'm Matt Turck from FirstMark. Welcome to the Mad Podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Nathan Benaich, founder of Air Street Capital, to discuss the 2025 edition of his State of AI report, a must-read on where the field really is. We cover a lot, including why power is the new bottleneck, reasoning and chain of action robotics, and the business reality, revenue, margins, and what it means for builders and investors. Please enjoy this great conversation with Nathan. Nathan, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
The State of AI 2025 is out, and as always, it's essential reading for anyone who's serious about understanding AI. This year, it's 312 slides of goodness. A bit of a big year in AI.
Every year I try to cut it down a little bit, but this year it just felt like we were sharing it with various sub-communities of the AI community. And each time we did that, the robotics folks would be like, hey, it's a little bit light on robotics. Can you add some more? And then we send it to the bio folks. I'm like, why don't you cite this paper or that paper? And hence the inflation.
Amazing. All right. So we're certainly not going to cover everything in this conversation, obviously. As always, the report is available in its entirety for free at stateof.ai. So we're going to riff on some of the most important topics and ideas in the report, but obviously people can go and check out the report directly for more. All right. So starting from the top, in the world of research, you mentioned that 2025 was the year reasoning got real. So how far have we come in the last 12 months?
I'd say pretty far. About 12 months ago or so, we had, I think, the very early inklings of it with O1 preview, potentially around like this time last year. And that was the first time you had a system that could kind of show its reasoning, show its stepwise process to get to a more complicated answer. And this has generally been the dream in AI for a long time. And since then to now, I'd say like the progress is pretty astounding. One of the areas that progress has kind of unveiled itself is in mathematics and other verifiable domains where you can like explicitly say, yes, the system works or doesn't work. And, we saw gold medals on the International Math Olympiad by a couple of labs, including OpenAI and DeepMind. That area probably with, if you'd asked experts again how long it would have taken, would probably been a decade. Then in areas a bit closer to my heart in biology and science, we've seen reasoning models kind of be used as an AI co-scientist. So just as a human would be reading lots of papers, planning experiments, running the experiments, and then doing data analysis, and then reformulating their hypothesis as a result. There's examples of models doing that in lieu of human, which is exciting because there's way too many papers to read. AI people kind of complain that it's like 50,000 papers a year. I'd say in biology and chemistry and physics, it's probably an order of magnitude more than that. And so DeepMind has shown that you can integrate this kind of reasoning model to sort of decipher new targets for disease, new mechanisms that were actually also proven in a wet lab scenario post facto. We've gone from systems that were kind of dumb stochastic parrots to now they can solve pretty meaningful challenges that I'd say like even a smart human couldn't.
And still in research, you talk a little bit in the report, or a lot in the report, about robotics and this evolution towards a system of action or chain of action, going from chain of thought to chain of action. What's happening there?
Yeah. I mean, the gist is probably 2 years ago, robotics was kind of a dead end. OpenAI had disbanded its robot team that was famous for solving the Rubik's Cube using locomotion with the hand. And so now robotics is probably going through a Cambrian explosion. There's so much excitement. And just as how language models informed biology, now language models are also informing robotics. So what you're referring to here is a sort of reasoning process for robots where a system is no longer just perceiving the environment and deciding what to act and sort of acting, but it's we've separated those steps. So now you have a reasoning model that looks at a task and tries to plan steps that a robot would need to do to execute that task, and then passes that plan over to an actuator, which goes and actually implements the plan, and that's what's called chain of action. And here, the Allen Institute was one of the first to really push this, and very swiftly thereafter, Gemini also followed, and we have some companies, including Seriac, that are implying this into the real world. So it does genuinely work. It's not just like a research thing.
So we think the big moment for robotics is upon us, because we all collectively have been talking about this for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it really is upon us in the industrial sector, in logistics and warehousing, kind of more constrained environments with very repetitive tasks. There is the sort of more holy grail of this kind of embodied human-like form factor, and putting a model on that might even be the same model that's been used in warehousing. A lot of money is going into that, but my personal bet is I think it's going to be the humanoid space is going to look much more like self-driving, where we have some very good isolated demos, but the long tail will kill you.
Hopefully not literally.
Yeah, and so we're going to go through many false starts. I think this is just the start.
Okay, great. So a big year in robotics and reasoning for people listening to this. If you're interested in deep dives into reasoning and RL and the evolution of AI systems, we've done a bunch of great episodes recently with Sholto from Anthropic, Jerry from OpenAI, and then Julian from Anthropic, if you're curious to learn more. Let's move on to the business of AI. You mentioned in the report that the business of AI finally caught up with the hype. What caught your attention in terms of fact stats in the last 12 months?
Yeah, a couple of them. Again, like where we came from 1 or 2 years ago was just tons of money going into this segment, building models, a lot of usage, but not clear where the revenue would come from. I think it was maybe OpenAI was making $50 million or something 2 years ago. And it was very unclear how they would ever hit like billions of revenue. And nowadays, I think if you sum sort of the top 20 or so major AI companies, from the labs to the most popular kind of vertical applications, across them, they're making tens of billions of dollars of revenue. You can look at the smaller scale companies, which are growing from 0 to 20 million or 20 million plus. As a group, they generally grow about 60% faster on a quarterly basis than non-AI companies. We've all seen like the famous charts about ARR or non-ARR. It's unclear, but very steep curves for various coding companies. And perhaps most interestingly, across a segment of 43,000 or so US customers, we work with Ramp to show that retention of subscriptions on AI products across this customer set has really improved markedly since 2022. Around 2022, it was around the 50% after 12 months. And now in 25, it's hitting around 80%. And the second stat in that analysis that was interesting was the total spend on AI products per customer kind of went up from $35,000 or so, maybe 2 years ago. Now it's around $500,000, and it's predicted to hit $1 million next year.
And you mentioned in your RAMP stats, 44% of US businesses now pay for AI tools. So they pay more, but there's a ton of businesses using AI.
Yeah, exactly. And there might be some sampling bias slightly to what kind of companies use RAMP
in the first place.
Yeah, so slightly more modern, tech-forward companies, but a leading indicator, I think, of where things could go.
And then you had your own survey, right, of 1,200 AI practitioners?
Yeah.
And what did that say?
Yeah, I was surprised. Obviously, bias is more towards, pretty well-educated U.S., European professionals. A lot of people in there have at least undergrad and master's degrees, maybe even more. But it's like 95% of people use AI in their personal life and in their professional life. About 76% of people pay out of their own pocket for it. It's like 10% of people pay more than $200 a month for it. And then looking at the organizations that they work at, it's like 70% of those organizations are spending a ton more or more than they did in the past on AI. The reasons that they gave for why they might not be spending more or what problems they have, it's like all the classic like new technology stuff. Like it's a bit hard to configure. It's I haven't really figured out the ROI yet because I need to do more customization. There's like some data privacy issues that I have. And I think all these things are kind of solvable. Like it's not rocket science how to solve these things.
Yeah, it feels like we very much live this year in the world of shadow AI in companies where, I mean, to reconcile, it's imperfect, but to reconcile your two stats, 44% of businesses use AI, yet 95% of people individually use AI.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of people, as you're alluding to, that use AI at work without being officially authorized to do so.
And I think there's still a big education gap. I mean, there was a study bandied around a couple of weeks ago where it said 95% of businesses get no value from AI.
Very, very controversial survey.
Yeah. But I think
95% is the number, right? Like everything is 95% in AI.
But I think that there it turned out it was not the models that were bad. It's the implementations of them were not great. So I think there's just a big education gap for how you should update your view of your own day-to-day tasks and apply what capabilities models have. And then and think about hey, should I be doing this task myself, or can I farm it out to a model? And there's definitely a delta of companies that really get this done well, and others that are basically clueless.
What do you make of the margin debate as an investor and industry analyst? Maybe recap what that debate is, and then what do you think about it?
At a high level, basically, the margin problem is. For many customers of large model companies, their margins are basically dictated by how much the model vendor charges them for. Now here there's some issues because right now model vendors are charging the same amount per token. So if you're a hedge fund analyst and I'm a student, your use case is clearly more financially valuable than mine, but we pay the same amount for the token, assuming we use the same model. There are some use cases that are more reasoning heavy towards what we discussed before, and they consume a ton of tokens. And the pricing that a customer pays for that product might not be fit for the amount of work the AI system is doing. And so there are cases where these kind of vertical products are making gross margins of 30%. And sometimes they get worse with scale because you do have some edge users that really pump the system and you can't price discriminate, or they haven't managed to. And then you have some segment of model users that have both a paid plan and a free plan, and it's not clear whether they include the costs of running the free plan in their gross margin. Mm-hmm. So they sort of just look at their paid customers. There's some creative accounting standards going on there, and then you have the model vendors themselves and what is their margin. And I think what's interesting in the last year is you've seen CEOs of these model companies say, "Hey, if we basically look at sort of in financial analysis terms, a layer cake of what revenue is generated by each vintage of model over time, it looks like prior models are profitable. So the amount of money we've spent to build them is less than the amount of money that we've generated with them over time, assuming a certain margin of inference cost. And so really these labs are not profitable because vastly more resources going into developing next generation systems than the prior ones. But as you and I both know, there are companies here that are making very, very good margins on serving their AI systems, 70, 80, sometimes 90%, depending on the modality. And so, with everything, the average number sucks. But when you look at the best companies, it's really good.
And just to drive it home, the companies using those models, we're talking about in part all the what used to be known as thin wrapper. Yeah. So the vendors that happen to be powered by those models. Yep. So the cursors, the windsurfs, Replit, all, and all the whatever legal, financial, AI startups. As examples. The other big debate in the business of AI, of course, is the bubble question. Yep. What's your take? Are we in an AI bubble? Are we not in an AI bubble?
Yeah. I think with most things in markets, there are probably localized bubbles all over the place. And I think just at a high level, what's interesting in terms of vibes and who's calling bubbles and who's not, the finance crowd in New York is definitely talking about bubbles a lot more than what we're talking about in San Francisco, where their view is this is the golden era of AI and a lot of things are working. We have so much more to do. Compute build-outs are enabling us to experiment a lot faster. This huge flood of talent that's built the consumer internet and cloud computing is moving into AI, and with that is bringing a lot of optimization techniques and knowledge that AI researchers didn't have when they built the first generations of ChatGPT, et cetera. But I think you can't ignore the fact that the sums of money going into this industry are truly gargantuan. Like 500 billion to build Stargate, and then a couple $100 billion here, a couple $100 billion there. Like pretty soon it's real money. And then like the circularity of these deals is interesting. Of course, Nvidia is at the center of this, and it has incentives to use its balance sheet to sort of spin the wheel faster. And then perhaps more concerningly, you have this sort of offloading of debt from big companies. For example, Meta, that raises tens of billions of dollars to fuel its data center ambitions, but that doesn't sit on Meta's balance sheet. Some of this is like catnip to financial engineers. But yeah, it rests on certain assumptions that everything is going to keep going up and to the right, and that rates don't materially change. And just given how I suppose precarious various aspects of the economy are, and how sensitive geopolitics are, things can flip quite quickly. But I think that's the major risk. The risk I'm less worried about is the stuff doesn't work, because I think it does work.
So it's a more question of timing to play it back, that the supply phase of the market is met by an equally strong or hopefully stronger demand side.
Yeah, there's that, and then just the nuances of the terms on the debt and what trigger events are, whether rates get repriced, and then investors behave very differently once rates change, and flows of money can be quite violent.
It's interesting what you're saying about the dichotomy between Wall Street and the West Coast. Also because when you think about it, there's actually not that many pure play AI companies in public markets, right? A lot of the action is happening in private markets. So effectively, if you're a Wall Street / hedge fund investor, you invest in Nvidia, you invest in the Mag 7. That's pretty much it, right? Palantir, C3 AI.
Yeah. Maybe you buy SoftBank for its position in OpenAI.
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of it is indirect, or you invest in power and energy, or related plays, CoreWeave, I guess. Yeah. But it's very small, so it feels like there's that tension as well.
Yeah. But I think it's also the crowd that you hang out with.
Yeah.
I mean, and I
do
think,
you live in a house in San Francisco with
correct.
2 or 3 other AI geniuses?
Correct. Or do you just consume the outputs of those kinds of conversations on Twitter, and then try to piece together your own worldview? And I think the other part of this is I don't think some of those individuals are really shilling that much anymore. I think they do genuinely believe what they say, and they are at the coalface of the advancements of these technologies. And so if they've been saying for the last 50 times, hey, this stuff is working, there's lots of implementations we can improve, or things we can tweak, or new experiments that'll yield better capabilities, and that has happened. At some point, you got to be maybe they're right.
Another aspect of this that's fascinating to me is the sort of dichotomy between some of the, I would call them the old guard, and the newer, younger kind of folks. So, from Rich Sutton to Jan LeCun to, obviously Jeffrey Hinton, a lot of those guys who are absolutely the godfathers of the space and built this entire thing, and are still extremely active today on top of everything, say that LLMs are just not going to get us there, or that we should just do everything with RL. And then, meanwhile, the younger guys, and they tend to be at places like Anthropic and OpenAI, so maybe they do have an agenda, but they're all saying, we're just scratching the surface of what we can do with those modern AI systems.
Yeah. I think do both. But I think for me, it's mostly what are kinds of new problems that you can work on and solve with this technology. And I think it's becoming more popular to believe the overhang of problems we can solve in enterprise for consumers and science with the tools we have today is huge. And so even if a lot of this compute build out doesn't go towards dreaming up the next transformer architecture, but goes into improving the unit economics of serving AI systems for everybody, and makes it easier so you don't have to be some prompt master to elicit a behavior you want for your task, I think that's not good.
All right, let's switch to the physical reality that this whole stack sits on. So infrastructure, data centers, energy. You mentioned in the deck that power has become the new bottleneck. What is your sense of the state of play in the energy procurement game?
The biggest stat for me is 1 gigawatt of a data center for AI basically costs $50 billion in capex. And on an annual running basis, it costs between like another 8 to 9 to maybe even $11 billion to run. And so when you have just casually a 10 gigawatt data center, that's like a lot of money. And so one of the problems is like, where does this energy come from? Traditionally it would be from, I don't know, coal or natural gas, potentially solar, or ideally at some point in the future, nuclear. And what we're seeing is right now, companies are trying to do deals with anybody who has any capacity. So we chronicle some deals with future nuclear reactor companies. Then that would take maybe a decade or 2 decades to deliver. Famously.
Yeah, that's Google inking a PPA deal with CFS to buy 200 megawatts of electricity from a planned fusion plant.
Yeah, exactly.
So the plant does not exist
yet. It does not exist, yeah. And then last year we documented the sort of restarting of 3 Mile Island.
Yes.
The nuclear facility, which was controversial in the past. And then in the short term, what many GPU data centers are getting powered on is just gas turbines. And because these can get set up a lot faster, but that has other issues, like they're super loud, and there's demand outside of the US for these things. And so now basically US tech companies are paying more to repatriate some of the supply that should have been shipped abroad. The other issue is the grid, and like to what degree the grid can even tolerate data centers getting plugged into it. Now, obviously, like these turbines are off grid, so it has some advantages. But in China, for example, we do some analysis between the US and China with regards to energy, and China has a lot more slack in its system to plug in for any unpredicted demands in energy. The UK famously cannot really tolerate more data centers on its grid. Wrapping all this together is driving some of the offshoring of data centers towards energy-rich countries, whether that's the UAE or even Norway. And then with that comes a lot of geopolitics of are these nations your friend or potentially not, and how do you ensure access to this regardless of your administration change and other things. So. It's wild that we've come to the point where we just want an AI that works on our computer, but to get that, you need to have so many more powerful systems collaborate with you.
Yeah, and I was just looking for the slide as you spoke, especially for United States versus China. We're talking about the dramatic difference where the capacity added in 2024 for the US, if I read this correctly, was 48.6 gigawatts. Whereas China was 429 gigawatts.
The other thing that's interesting is at least the states in the U.S. Or actually also internationally that are good for hosting data centers because there's energy, typically are extremely dry, and we also chronicle the water usage that's needed for cooling of these data centers. And so if your state is super dry, where do you get the water from? Is that actually going to detract away from human populations that need the water? Then you have this whole recycling of water, which could potentially yield just bad quality water getting circulated into the water system. So
the sustainability aspect to all of this seems extraordinarily important, yet under discussed, or at least that's my perspective. Is that correct? Do people actually care and do something about the sustainability aspect of this?
Well, a year or two ago, big companies did make commitments to be green as of 2030, and then as soon as they started inking deals with nuclear companies and various energy providers for data centers, all those commitments basically got washed away. So it seems like maybe they care, but the corporate priorities of making AI work have way outweighed the environmental constraints. That's what's happened. But I think, again, going back to the politics side of things, I don't think everybody's very happy about this. Particularly, there's this growth of NIMBYism, this not in my backyard. And I do think that people generally don't want to have a data center in their backyard. And I think that's going to drive some of the political agendas like going forward, whether it's in the US or other countries. So yes, people do care about environmentalism. Companies have sort of washed that away, but I think it's going to come back.
If we talk about infrastructure, obviously we have to talk about Nvidia. Feels like it's been another extraordinary last 12 months for Nvidia.
Yep.
Do you see Nvidia continue to break away as like the undisputed number one in the market, or do you think that sooner or later we're going to end up with a multi-silicon kind of world?
I think it's going to be 95.5, back to 95%.
Is it Pareto revisited?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so, for context, when we did the executive summary last year, we put NVIDIA, hit 1 trillion for the first time, and now we had to change that to 4 trillion. We look at all the open source AI research papers every year, which is about 49,000 or so, and then programmatically determine which chipsets are used in those papers. So we know, like, hey, an AI researcher is doing a study on, some new model, and in their experimental setup, they say, we train the model for X number of GPU hours on whatever chip. And if you do that analysis, you basically find that 90% of all papers make use of a NVIDIA chip. Out of that same analysis, we did find that AMD is sort of popping up a very little bit. Apple Silicon is as well. I think it's just because the MacBook is getting so good that people are doing local training and experiments on their computer.
But Broadcom is experiencing a resurrection of some sort as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it has. I think it's maybe a decade ago, they bought a company that now is kind of the internal team doing this custom ASICs for Google's TPU. And, more recently, they announced a deal with OpenAI also to do a custom chip. And at a high level, what's interesting with the rise of Broadcom is basically GPUs have been the dominant chipset for a long time, as the kind of nature of the neural network or other kind of AI system that you're running on the hardware was still changing very rapidly. But as soon as you get to a point where there's some convergence on an architecture that looks like it's stable and is revenue generating, and developers are coming to sort of work on it and confirm that it is like the thing, then you can flip towards doing a custom chip that's built to extract the most value out of that architecture. And so the rise of Broadcom basically tells you like there's strong forces that are saying like the transformer is the thing. But at the end of the day, like we also look at how would your dollar be best used as an investor if you wanted to bet on chip companies. And in the graph, in the report, we look at sort of 6 of the major contenders to Nvidia, and basically said, if you bought Nvidia stock on the day of the announcement of all the like private rounds in these companies, what would the value of your stock be in Nvidia versus these companies? And if I recall correctly, it's basically 12x in Nvidia versus 2x in these competitors, and the trend was roughly the same last year. So I think it's a little bit of a difficult beast to bet against.
Yes, I was looking for that slide as you were speaking. It's for anybody that looks at the report, that slide 166 that says what would have happened if investors had just bought the equivalent amount of Nvidia stock at that day's price. The 7.5 billion would be worth 85 billion in Nvidia stock today, 12x, versus 14 billion, 2x for its contenders. And the contenders being Grok, Cerebras, Sembanova, Celestial, GraphCore.
And in China, Cambricon has experienced, a big run. This is, a private company that then went public on Chinese stock exchange to build custom ASICs for AI, and that was driven mostly by the geopolitical sort of zigzagging on policy with regards to exporting custom NVIDIA chips to China, the H20, which at some point was deemed to be okay by the government and then deemed to be not okay. But then okay if 15 to 20% of the revenue was passed back to the U.S. government, and then someone high up in the U.S. administration said, our goal is basically to ship the like crappy stuff to China, and at that point, the Chinese said like, no, thank you, and, and effectively said no one can buy Nvidia chips, and then Cambricon stock rips.
And that's Huawei as well, right? That's the emergence of a separate Chinese full stack from the models, which we'll probably talk about at some point in this conversation of open source, but very much at the chip layer. So that's what you mentioned, and then Huawei, whatever the model is, becoming the sort of default chip for the Chinese stack.
Yeah. And there's some interplay between the government trying to get DeepSeek and other labs to run their models on Chinese chips. And there's been rumors that this is why a lot of the new generations of Chinese models have slowed down, particularly DeepSeek. Like people are waiting for the next R1, so like R2 and allegedly it's because it's just hard to run it on Huawei.
To double click on something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, talk about sovereign AI and what you've seen people do. It seems to have been a big theme of the year. You mentioned OpenAI in Norway, India, and UAE. What's happening in that world?
Yeah,
in that part of the world.
Yeah. So the idea with sovereign AI is that nation states want to be able to control basically their fate with regards to AI. So that's running models, as training models, having chips, and this is basically because nation states want to have control over their energy, control over their currency, control over their infrastructure, and AI is deemed to be kind of equivalent to those categories. And so ever since the White House announcement of $500 billion in January, various nation states have followed suit, saying, we have our own initiative, and it's to the tune of billions of dollars, et cetera, around the world. And Nvidia has even started marketing this as like a new kind of product line, basically, for its business that currently generates, I think, around $20 billion worth. So it's real money. And so they're forming partnerships with various nation states to provide data centers there that are run locally, and in theory that should give like countries comfort that their access to AI can't be turned off. That's the idea. I personally think it's a bit more of an alignment between political agendas, where particularly in the U.S., it's really about reindustrialization, like onshoring of key industries and building, manufacturing and things like that, which is, I think, one of the reasons why these AI data centers are getting rebranded as AI factories. And so that's the political part, and that's getting aligned with just the need of countries to get access to this technology. So I think it's more marketing than it is like a real policy, because at the end of the day, if you buy your stack from the US and you're not an ally of the US at some point, then they'll just switch it off. Mm-hmm. And so part of this is like sovereignty washing, I think. And it also like oversimplifies the very interconnected nature and ecosystem aspect of AI, where it's not just about the chip, it's about the developer ecosystem, how you actually run it, where your training data comes from, and all the like infrastructure, like data tools and whatnot that sit around this.
Although that's where open source plays an important role, right?
Yes.
If you get your AI from OpenAI and indeed you are a US ally, but you no longer are US ally for whatever reason, there's a risk that you could be turned off. But if you have a sovereign data center and with a bunch of like chips running, and then you run open source on top of it, like presumably you are safe.
Which is then interesting, because where is the most popular open source coming from now?
Yes, China. Yes.
Although,
interestingly, I think since you published the report, there's been the announcement of a very large investment in Reflection AI, which is a New York and San Francisco-based company that just raised $2 billion to build the US equivalent of the Chinese models in a world where Llama and Meta have sort of gone in a different direction.
Yep. I think this is fascinating because part of the AI action plan that was published by the U.S. government a couple of months ago now, articulated the need for having this American AI stack. So they're moving away from like diffusion controls and more towards just buy our stuff. And then one of the other aspects of that action plan was around open source and sort of leading in that direction. And of course, as you said, like Meta stepped back, and into the fold came Qwen. I think 50% of all model derivatives being downloaded from Hugging Face are Qwen based now. Hundreds of millions of downloads, partially because they come in very accessible shapes and flavors. So as a result of that, we sort of predicted in the report that that a major AI lab would lean back into open source to win basically brownie points with the government. And then the next day, this financing happened.
Oh, like amazing. Great timing, yeah. And I think you say in the report as well that your sense was that OpenAI was sort of forced, for lack of a better term, into releasing an open source model to be on the right side of history. Yeah,
I think that's one of them. And then the second one probably dovetails with their announcement with AMD. And I say that because, quite recently, SemiAnalysis kind of published this benchmarking data set where they run models on various clouds to sort of benchmark them. And actually, GPT OSS looks pretty good on AMD. And so one could imagine that there were some optimizations, and there actually were optimizations to GPT OSS, so it runs nicely on AMD. It has support from their framework from day one. The parameterization of the model is to the point where you can run it on a single AMD chip, and then some other nuances to their attention mechanisms that they customize to make it work really good on AMD. And to the point around like the circular economy stuff that we discussed a little while ago, there's like another financial sweetener in the deal where OpenAI has warrants in AMD if the stock price hits 600. And so you can see how there's a lot of like incentives to this game of both like aligning with US government, helping developers, which is a good thing, but also like helping one of your vendors improve, which frankly, it does need help and it should improve, but also getting some financial sweetener as a result of that, which could help you kind of make the flywheel spin faster.
And since we're talking about circularity, talk about concentration as well. So maybe as an echo to the conversation about the bubble a few minutes ago, it does feel like this AI economy has a lot of, depending on how you look at it, from funky to scary things.
Yeah. Well, a lot of Nvidia's revenue comes from the major, hyperscalers or neoclouds. So, it's like Meta, like XAI, Google, Amazon, then CoreWeave. And then a lot of CoreWeave's revenue also comes from Microsoft on the way back. I think it's just this challenge with AI progress that we've, very meaningfully shifted from, I think, the GPT-3 era to now of basically scale, like rate limits your progress. And it's no longer like a couple of people in a dorm room that can really build something transformational. If they want to advance like AI capabilities, it's really big boy land now. And so with that comes just different dynamics. Like you have to be good at capital raising. You have to align yourself with nation states. You have to align yourself with Wall Street. These are all, I think, contributing to the big vibe shifts that you've seen in the culture of AI labs.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, there were some labs like Anthropic that were built, to really push the safety agenda, because if we didn't do that, the rationale went that we could lead to the extermination of humanity, right? And I think quite recently, like Dario was interviewed by Mark Benioff just this past week and asked about like some of these data center build outs and he said something along the lines of, there's a lot of money going into this, a lot of cost, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is revenue. Like, I don't think he would have said that, on the founding day of Anthropic. And, it's just the reality that the table stakes in this game have changed. And with that, entrepreneurs have to update their priors and change their strategy a little bit. And so we document some of this in like sort of the blooper section of the report, which is just like how much of a sort of pendulum swinging we've noticed in corporate priorities at AI labs as a result of the extreme financialization of the sector.
Are you encouraged or discouraged by some of the stuff that's happening at the app layer in particular, whether that's AI slop or focus on on revenue and versus the ideal? Like, do you think that's inevitable but good, or what do you make of it?
I think we're just at such an early era to like see how you can maximally extract value and create interesting experiences for people with this AI technology that we have to try a lot of different things. At the end of the day, if you're a lab that expends tens of billions of dollars on R&D, you do have to have a way to generate money to fund that. I think that's just reality, and I think like the slop thing. I mean, if it's bad, people won't look at it, and if people look at it and they enjoy it, then good for them. Like, I don't necessarily have like a huge problem with that. As long as like where I'm expending my time, I find is useful, and so that's why I end up spending a lot of my time on like enterprise software, automation, biology, like doing new discoveries in drug discovery, like defense technology and autonomy, robotics. I think these are all like very important macro drivers of the economy. And as we move into an era where like intelligence is increasingly cheap and accessible. There's just so many different like instantiations of products that we need to build that are really meaningful. And if a byproduct of that is we have a social media app with like AI videos, like that's fine too. We all have to like unwind.
Right. You mentioned safety a minute ago. I'd love to riff on that theme a little bit. IP rights, safety, regulatory. A little bit like the sustainability thing that we were discussing earlier. It sort of feels like that whole world has sort of slowed down in terms of like progress. Maybe starting with regulatory. Do you think that regulatory is anywhere near catching up or providing an adequate response to what's going on?
Yeah, I'd say like a big 180 on that one. I mean, clearly the Trump administration unwound a lot of the Biden era policies. Whether that was on diffusion, trying to push a lot of state level legislation against AI. Over in Europe, like the EU AI Act has had delays in implementation. There's only 3 member states that have actually implemented it, and now we're finally seeing how even its authors are saying maybe we went too far. Particularly as we look at progress, the speed of progress in the US and China compared to Europe. Famously, this bill in California, rate limiting AI progress was really watered down into what eventually became SB 53. There were, many proposed bills. I think over 1,000. 10% of them actually made their way into laws. So it's still kind of patchworky, but like at a meta level, it looks like we traded regulation for just going faster. It was perhaps like best encompassed by the shift between the AI Safety Summit in the UK, which was at Bletchley, which basically pledged like a whole network of AI safety institutes and conferences that would happen over the coming years, to then the subsequent event in Paris, which was called the AI Action Summit, completely different than AI Safety Summit. And JD Vance saying something along the lines of basically like AI progress is not going to happen if we keep hand-wringing over AI safety. And the US basically didn't show up to a few of the subsequent conferences. And we have this in the like safety RIP section of like, very few people seem to care about it anymore.
And to the vibe shift, like even the more doomerist parts of the ecosystem have kind of quieted down, right? It feels like the debate has gone from kill all of us to more like, well, is LLMs per RL the better way to get to AGI kind of thing?
Yeah.
So the naysayers have like shifted their kind of like approach.
Yeah. And I think it's become less about this existential crisis and more about which capabilities look concerning in models. And there's been some kind of interesting data points that we chronicle in the report. Like, for example, models can increasingly know that they're in a simulation or know that they're in an evaluation and then change their behavior as a result of that. There's examples of models trying to like exfiltrate their own weights. There's another piece of work that we show, which is around the cybersecurity capabilities of models, which is basically measuring how long does a human take to solve various categories of cyber tasks, and then putting models at against those same tasks and saying, how long would it take for them to solve it at a 50% pass rate? And there it looks like, again, the capabilities on cyber tasks of models are doubling every 6 months. And then, so this is cast against the fact that independent safety organizations, those maybe like 5 or 6, these are usually nonprofits that are still nonprofits or private companies. They spend on average $134 million a year in total.
Total budget across all of them.
Yeah, across all of them, exactly. And that's cast against roughly like 92 billion across all AI work for the major labs. So basically like the same amount of money that a big lab would spend in one day is spent in an entire year across these safety orgs.
130 million, aka a seed round in a week-old AI startup.
Correct.
What about data rights? That was another part of that just general kind of like policy universe that was very sensitive and controversial. There's been some evolution in the last year, right?
Yeah, major changes. I think it looks a little bit like the sort of on-demand commerce war of, the Uber style of do something that's a bit like dodgy for a long time, get to scale, and then once you're at scale, you're kind of too big to kill. And so similarly in AI, like a lot of companies took slightly dodgy practices to acquire training data and then got to scale. And they were subject to many lawsuits in the last year or two, particularly in the media sector, whether that's music or video and books. And then there was the biggest settlement that happened in the last few months with Anthropic that agreed to pay out $1.5 billion. And this was settled out of court, so it can't be used as precedence, but generally shows the rough price tag that's associated with human works in the context of AI training. And then separately, there's been dozens, if not 100, organizations that have agreed content licensing deals with various model companies. As I think the power shift has really happened.
1.5 billion still being a drop in the bucket for a company like Anthropic. Interestingly, does that create a moat over time, meaning that you have to be large enough to be able to afford that kind of money that you're going to pay to data rights if you want to do pre-training? And does it make it harder to start a company that needs to do pre-training from scratch?
In one sense, yes. In another sense, if you can exploit the knowledge of these frontier models, particularly from open source, and then generate synthetic data, could be a way to get to capable models faster. And also, I think, you'll have many guests that go deep on this, but even the nature of pre-training and what information is included in the corpus and at what point, it's kind of like data mixtures, as people call it, has been evolving over time. So I think we're just getting smarter about how to do pre-training rather than shoving everything we have into a bucket and like seeing what happens. And so as a result of that, you might not necessarily have to spend the exact same amount of money to get a capable system. And some of this kind of came out from the DeepSeek paper.
You mentioned cyber. Let's riff on this a little bit. Obviously, AI creates new attack vectors.
Yeah.
What should people know?
As of a couple of years ago, people were obsessed with deepfakes, or like these videos of people saying things that they didn't actually say, and they were still kind of grainy and not awesome. Clearly, those deepfakes are getting a lot better. Although quite positively, it looks like we're actually quite good at detecting them and realizing, that's like.
Yeah.
But there's more advanced approaches now where models can be capable of coercion, particularly for some individuals who are sensitive to this kind of risk. There's been examples of, for example, North Korean state actors trying to infiltrate other states using AI systems. You could potentially even package a language model in malware and then have it installed in a computer, and then it kind of wakes up, and because it's not dumb, it's a language model, it can do things on computers, and that's kind of scary. The rise of MCP, I think, is Model Context Protocol, which is kind of like a USB stick for all sorts of data connectors, is cool because now models can be smart. They can integrate all your stuff across your digital life. But do you necessarily trust the creator of that MCP server? Like, where is that data getting sent? There's tens of thousands of these things now, and cybersecurity risks that result because of this. And also some changes towards APIs of model APIs that sort of trade off whether the user or the model vendor manages state. And depending on that, that's another like risk that you have to think about. And so I think at a high level, like there are lots of security issues that are coming to the fore here, but it's sort of still unclear whether there's a good business to be built in cyber for AI, because it's still so early. Like we haven't necessarily like felt the pain of all these things yet, reputationally and financially. And a bit like insurance, until you have actually felt the pain, you sort of like prefer to divert your money towards just like improving and making more money than protecting your downside.
Yeah, interesting. And it's another area where the incumbents are not asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, and all the big labs. Yeah, exactly. So if you're really good at security, do you want to, it's a bit like AI safety. If you're really good at these things, do you want to be in the belly of the beast and be able to like see how the sausage is made and like influence it because of the proximity? Or do you want to be on the other side, like receiving the artifacts and maybe at best doing collaborations with labs on pre-launch safety testing, like they do in the UK with AZ and in the US? Or at worst, just like literally trying to sell a cybersecurity SaaS to people who are consuming these models. So I can understand like why that imbalance occurs.
And to your point about it being hard to sell before the pain is felt, it feels like there's a whole generation of young startups that are going to acquired pretty quickly by the Palo Alto networks and checkpoints of the world.
Yes.
Before they got a chance to get to scale. I mean, something that feels like it probably turned out to be great for the founders, but in terms of building large, self-standing, sustainable companies, not so much. Agents. It cannot be a 2025 conversation on AI without talking about agents. What is your sense of the reality in the state of play?
There's some vertical products that are really good. Clearly, search is actually pretty good. Replacing consulting, replacing market research, or augmenting all these areas that were previously very heavy human knowledge working tasks is getting extremely good. I think coding agents clearly are getting really good. There's other metrics around like how long they can work autonomously. I think with the new Haiku release, it's 30 hours or something, and it can make a pretty decent version of Slack.
Yes, although a controversial number, but yes, up to 30 in lab testing.
Lab testing,
I think.
okay.
Yes.
Exactly. What does even hours mean in an agent of like a computer running it?
Yes.
Is that equivalent? Yeah.
Yes.
And then some of the scientific reasoning we talked about is agent based. I think that's also quite neat. I think the biggest problems just become like this kind of compounding error of an agent is like 95% like good, and then 95% times 95% times et cetera, sort of decays the quality over a long period of time. And then there's some contention now about like, do you build these harnesses, i.e. like nerd speak for sticky tape, between like models to like make it work in enterprise, or do you just wait until the next model generation hopefully becomes better out of the box? I think a ton of excitement, and at some point, basically, just as desktop software became SaaS, at some point SaaS will just become an agent because it's no longer really like a human that's actually doing everything in the software product, but a software that's running the software product itself, which I think has cool implications for like search and product discovery and this whole like ecosystem of like online content. Like, is it humans that are reading it anymore, or is it agents that are chewing it and then serving it to their human overlords?
Are you excited for that? Like the whole evolution away from we go on a website to buy a product versus answer engine / search engine that's largely OpenAI that enables us to buy natively.
I'm not so enthusiastic about we're going to have agents that'll book flights for us and travel. I feel like that's just like a niche problem. That sort of like the sad canonical use case in San Francisco, but but I think what's telling so far is that traffic that's generated through conversations in AI search onto a commerce platform converts at a higher level than direct traffic. So the intent is really high because there's already been like background research that's been undertaken in chat. I think that's really powerful and you can't ignore. And then the next question on that is, okay, so what content is the model actually consuming to serve recommendations or information to its user? People say, oh, Google search is dead. I think that's like probably completely wrong because ChatGPT references Google a ton as it shifted off of Bing. And so maybe it's not like the front page of Google that's being consumed by a human, but by a sort of agent that represents the user. If you're a company that has a new product and you want it to be recommended, then there is like this flywheel that you should probably get on as soon as possible, because the more you make your content and your website and your product accessible to agents that can try it even like a demo environment for an agent to go test your new SaaS product, the more it will be able to learn about your product and provide recommendations to relevant prompts from human users. And then if you kind of go the next step, which is all this like reinforcement learning and environments and preference learning and things like that, then that flywheel like accelerates even faster. So I feel like it's kind of inevitable. It does kind of open up this agent experience rather than just pure user experience, sort of craft within software companies. That is yet another like piece of alpha that one should jump on sooner rather than later.
Where does it all leave you as a VC? We have been talking about the State of AI report, which is your annual labor of love and content, and which I think everybody in the industry very much appreciates because there's so much going on. So tying everything together in one document is incredibly helpful. But you're first and foremost a VC. You're wearing an Air Street T-shirt,
yes.
As people can see if they're watching the video. But otherwise, trust me, if you're listening to this on Spotify, it's a very, very nice logo. Kind of retro a little bit.
Yeah,
kind of Pan Am.
It's inspired from like old U.S. Air Force.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
So what are you excited about? So you mentioned like a bunch of like deep tech robotics. Is that what you invest in? Where do you think value can be built for founders and the VCs who love them going forward?
Yeah. The meta thing I care about is how do you build and make use of AI to create like new kinds of product experiences, new kinds of companies. And for me, that's like best expressed by companies that are AI first. So that's like both in terms of the product that they build. If you rip out the AI, the thing doesn't work. But also in like how they approach their like company philosophy, the types of people they hire, where they allocate resources. And then I've generally just tried to follow areas of industry that are increasingly ripe for getting value out of AI. So traditionally that would be, lots of data for a task that they care about, not enough people to do that task, but where there's a clear ROI if that task gets automated or increasingly automated. And so that led me, 10 years ago or so to first do like fintech style investments. And then after that, biology really came online into this new wave called tech bio. So I made some investments there, like Valence Discovery that we sold to Recursion, and Allsite we sold to Excientia. And then more recently, Profluent, which is kind of leading the charge for these language models in protein design, developing the first like CRISPR genome editor that an AI has created. Then like another segment that really came online in the US was in defense, and more recently in Europe after the Munich Security Conference in February, kind of unwound a lot of assurances that European states had for US security guarantees. And that like led to a big influx of, holy shit, we need to defend ourselves because no one's coming to save us. And so I have some investments there, like Delhi and Alliance Industries in the UK and Greece. And then in robotics, as we discussed, so a team in Stuttgart called Seriact, which is developing kind of these general purpose AI models for robotic manipulation and increasingly going to other form factors. And then I've been obsessed with voice. I think we talked actually about voice the last time I was here, and I'm still just like amazed at how...
The magic demo, I think you were saying.
Yeah, like the magic demo,
If you want to impress your smart but non-AI pilled executive friend, you show them voice.
Yeah, exactly. So I've definitely used their company, 11 Labs, to like create audio of me speaking Korean. Like I've A/B tested this that apparently it sounds pretty good. But I have this like, newer company called Delpha, which is building tools for clinical trials, like starting with actually just calling back patients who want to be part of your trial and need to be consented. And these are conversations in lots of different languages, a lot of like kind of esoteric medical terminology. Patients forget what drugs they were on, so they have to call you back. And this is like super laborious human work that agents like 11 Labs and others in audio like solve really well. So I'm excited to see where this goes at the limit. And then perhaps like the more sciencey stuff, like these generative world models, I think are pretty amazing. Whether it's Google's, Genie or VO or Odyssey system, or you're sort of like imagining this world, and then you can take actions in it, and the actions are physically plausible because the system was trained with video plus actions. And then maybe taking that even into scientific discovery for just trying to explore like the frontier and being a bit smarter with what experiments we run, because now foundation models are not dumb.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So to close the conversation, of course, we have to go into your predictions.
Yep.
So each time you do the State of AI report, you boldly come up with a prediction for the next 12 months. So without going into all 10, and people can check them out mostly on slide 304. Pick like, maybe 3 that you're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, I think one is just how politically charged a lot of the kind of AI compute data center build out actually becomes because of energy, because of water, because of money, because of geopolitics. And I think that that's becoming too large of an issue for voters to ignore. And so we predict that this kind of NIMBYism, not in your backyard, will kind of take precedence in major political campaigns in 2026. I mean, the other one that I think is interesting is like a fully end-to-end designed or developed scientific discovery. I would honestly predict Nobel Prize, but the 12-month window is a little bit too short. I think the AlphaFold Nobel Prize is probably the fastest in history.
A Nobel Prize won by an AI.
Yeah.
Versus the recent Nobel Prizes were for like AI researchers using AI to come up with better, with breakthroughs, but that was a human powered by AI.
Yeah.
Here, what you're talking about is an AI actually winning.
Yeah. Last year, I mean, we predicted maybe like a step towards this, which was a fully AI written research paper would be accepted at a major conference or workshop, and that actually happened with this paper, AI Scientist V2, I think. So I think we're getting there because this is what the nerds are really wanting to work on. Like as a meta point, I think there's all these like software industries where analysts think like, oh my god, it's going to be dead because of AI. But I think part of the reality is what's not going to be dead is the problems that like these AI people don't want to work on because it's so boring to build that software.
That's such a fantastic heuristic.
Workday is safe. He was funny, like actually that CEO, because I think he said recently in response to is OpenAI or Anthropic or et cetera, like a threat to your business, and he just replied, "They're all my customers." Yeah.
All right, let's pick another one.
I mean, it's kind of cheating, but the open source one, I think happened. Whether this particular company is a leading lab or not is beside the point. That basically like aligning yourself with political agendas is the way to go. And I think you could maybe take this even further and say like, similar to how Nvidia has been monetizing sovereign AI, a way for nation states to kind of guarantee access to AI services is for them as nations to invest in one of these labs. There's obviously still a risk that due to export controls, the US can just like tell OpenAI to switch it off. But I think it's interesting that, for example, the Albanian government invested in thinking machines. Obviously, the CEO comes from there. And so I wrapped this kind of prediction or this topic in a prediction that said, some countries will basically abandon their efforts to achieve AI sovereignty and declare AI neutrality. It's a bit similar to like the defense posture where some nation states are just too small or don't have enough people or don't have the money, et cetera, or the capabilities to develop weapon systems to defend themselves. And so they have a strategic security guarantee that they get from a larger neighboring nation. I think it doesn't seem that inconceivable to me that various countries would just say, I can't build this stuff. I need to have a formal alliance with another country that is sovereign.
Well, Nathan, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. The State of AI 2025, again, is available at stateof.ai. It's remarkably comprehensive and detailed, yet approachable. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming on today, sharing predictions. Hopefully I get to embarrass you at least a little bit for the next one.
That'd be great.
When some of those predictions turn out to not have panned out. But this was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for running it back.
Appreciate it.
Hi, it's Matt Turck again. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mad Podcast. If you enjoyed it, we'd be very grateful if you would consider subscribing if you haven't already, or leaving a positive review or comment on whichever platform you're watching this or listening to this episode from. This really helps us build the podcast and get great guests. Thanks, and see you at the next episode.